So I think we will go ahead and get started, if that's cool. I'm gonna introduce my buddy here. So you ready to get going, Yagel? You got whatever you need, water, coffee?
I got it, man. Let's do it. I'm excited.
All right, me too. So yeah, so Yagel, and I call him Yagel because his name's Kris Yagel, but we went by last names when we were in the military. Um, we were talking, I don't know, a few months ago. We visited a few times over the past few years, and I know that you have a lot of great things going on with your company, and you have a lot of leadership experience. But Diego and I were classmates at West Point, and we were friends and kind of followed in the same crowd. Remember, weren't you roommates with Sama for a little bit? Sama's one of my best friends.
Yeah, we were in the same company, and then out in the Army, we actually roomed together during one of the officer courses. I think the basic course. Yeah,
Oh wow, okay. Yeah,
yeah.
so it's like we didn't hang out that much, but we admired each other from a distance and respected each other from a distance. And we did get to hang out a little bit, but I also remember we were both freaking gym rats and always trying to get jacked. We were
Always.
always up there working out. So Yeagle, he has a military career that's given him a ton of leadership experience and skills, and he has his own company called Diligent Plans, where he consults businesses and other groups on leadership and getting unstuck to help live their best lives possible. And I just thought it'd be great to come in here and share some of his wisdom, and um, and I think that's a good little intro for you, right, brother?
That's perfect, man. That was more than I can ever ask for. I appreciate that.
So, Yeagle, let's start with telling us about your story and how you got to where you are right now, and what you're doing right now.
Sure. Well, I'll go back all the way because I'm a proud East Coast guy. Born in West Virginia, raised in Pennsylvania. And by the way, my parents weren't related before marriage, just to clarify about the West Virginia thing. But I'm a big Steelers fan, and I grew up on the East Coast. I decided my dad.
Oh, sorry, whoa, whoa, whoa. I accidentally muted you. I was muting everybody else. Hold on.
I'm good. I
There
think
you
I
go.
got.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
Yeah.
Where did I leave off? My dad was a veteran. He was in the Air Force, and one day we were sitting there, and he's like, in high school, he's like, "Hey, have you thought about college?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want to go to Penn State. All my buddies are going to Penn State." And he's like, "Have you thought about a military academy?" And I hadn't. And we pulled out the 1967 encyclopedias and looked at West Point, and that is the only academy I applied to, and I ended up, by the grace of God, getting in.
Dude, good
And
job.
yeah, man, it was a long 4 years, as you know, bro. I'm lucky to make it out of there.
Well, I had to
But
fight for it. I had to do it from being, active duty enlisted. So that's pretty awesome.
yeah, it was a good experience. I ended up being the first guy from my high school to go,
Nice.
and kind of pioneered some new ground. But it began a pattern for my life. I think that's relevant for this group and good to share. And that was usually you're faced with a couple choices, typically two or more, and one's kind of the easy way and one's kind of the hard way. And what I did in my life was I made a habit of always choosing the hard way, even though I didn't know how I was going to figure it out. Like Richard Branson says, if a great opportunity comes across your desk, pick it or choose it and figure out how to do it after you've already committed to it. And that's what I did with West Point. I didn't know anything about the Army, man. I just said, this looks hard and hard's for me, and I'm going to do it. And so I ended up getting out in the Army, and
Well, hey, can
uh,
I can I ask you a question though, real quick
yeah.
about Westbrook? So, what did you think about it when you got there? Like, did you feel like it was really challenging? Did it meet your expectations?
It was super challenging, man. And it's so funny. I grew up 3.5 hours from it, and I never visited prior to going. So I had no context at all about what I was walking into other than people I talked to. But, you
And,
know,
and pictures and stuff. You go up there and you look around and you see the little lookout point there on the Hudson River. It's like, what a beautiful place, and the
yeah, I
buildings, and
didn't,
then but living there is completely different.
man, I didn't realize how beautiful it was. And of course, we didn't really get to appreciate that until we were about to graduate,
Yeah,
because we
yeah,
were running
yeah.
around for 4 years. But it's one of the last special places I think in our country, honestly. Not as much touched by progress as other places, and
Really, that's
very,
good to hear.
very
Hmm.
special, I think. And then of course when we were there in the late '90s, we were the last segment of the attrition model, where it was hazing and turn up the heat. If you wash out, you wash out. What did we
Hmm.
lose, Paul? Like 250 of our classmates before
Oh yeah.
graduation.
Yeah.
So it's not like that anymore. Now it's more of a
Hmm.
developmental model. They give you more chances and things. But yeah, it was tough, man. But it exceeded expectations as far as development, and then the camaraderie and friendships I made there were second to
Yeah.
none.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. And then after that, I interrupted you. Sorry, you were going into after
Oh,
getting
you're
out of
good,
what?
man. Out in the Army, I was an MP, military police, ground pounding MP. I got to do some really cool stuff. I was stationed in Virginia on the coast. I ran a SRT team, SWAT team for about 2.5 years, and got to work with Navy SEALs and FBI SWAT and different municipalities. That's a whole other podcast, man. Tons of stories there. Those
Dude,
guys.
I did not know that. That's so cool. I went to SRT school and it was at Fort McClellan.
Oh
You know,
yeah,
yeah.
I didn't know you were SRT. Yeah.
And you got to see some action, or you know,
I mean, we had our
yeah.
we had our call outs on posts and different things. We had a barricade subject, I think, once or twice, and hostage situation. They ended up resolving before we had to go in. But yeah, it was super cool, man. It was
Yeah.
training with the SEALs. So everything that you see in the movies about the SEALs is true.
Hmm.
They are top notch. I mean, Hollywood can't even embellish how good they are. They are really good, but they are more humble than you see in the movies. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
They don't brag about anything. Not the ones I met. You go into a bar, and the guy at the bar talking about being a SEAL is not the SEAL. It's the guy at the other end sipping on his whiskey, not saying a dang word. And
Hmm.
they're top notch, man. So I got to do that, and then I had some injuries while I was in, so I ended up having a couple surgeries before I ended up in command, and then I got out um, and went into the corporate world and applied a lot of the leadership principles and things I had learned to the corporate world. But there was always something tugging on me, man, like a calling that I had to get in front of people and speak and make some kind of impact through speaking or training, consulting. And so one day I walked away from a 6-figure medical sales job and started my company. And I think I made 18 grand the first year. And that's 12 years ago. I'm still at it. That's what
Dude,
I do these days.
that takes some courage, man. And I know exactly how that feels, but it takes a lot of courage. But it's like you got this one life, and why not follow what it is that you feel like is your passion? You got to give it a shot. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Remember you were telling me that story about breaking your collarbone?
Oh, shoot. Yeah,
What?
yeah, that's a good story. So this was after the military. This was like 7 years ago. I think it was 2015.
Oh,
So I got this weird hobby. I rebuild and I ride three-wheelers from the 80s. Remember the
hmm.
old ATCs, the Hondas, like
Yeah,
big
like the big
red?
red. Yeah, the big
Yeah.
red. Yeah.
I have a big red. I have a 250R, which is a racer. I have a 350X, which is a racer. And yeah, I have these things. So I was riding one of them about 7 years ago, and like all the conditions happened wrong at one time. It's funny. It's never big things. Like, when planes crash, it's not because the wings fell off all of a sudden. It's like 15 things that are all off at one time causes a catastrophic loss. And like 4 or 5 things. So I was a little rusty. I hadn't been riding for a while. My tires were overinflated because I was trying to get some flat spots out of them. It was dusk and I was wearing tinted goggles, so I couldn't see that well. I was on a trail I'd never been on before. Long story short, I ended up hitting a bump. And with a three-wheeler, if you hit a bump in the rear, it catapults you usually to the opposite front. And man, this thing came down on me. 350-pound bike came down on me, and I shattered my left collarbone and broke it into 3 pieces and broke some ribs. So I'm sitting in the hospital and I have my shirt off. I'm sitting on the bed, bones almost through the skin, but not quite. And the doc's looking at my chart, and he's like, "Do you have a neck fusion?" I said, "Yeah, I had 2 discs taken out of my neck, so I have C5, 6, 6, 7 fused with cadaver bone." And he's like, "Wow, tell me about the accident." And I said, "Well, I was riding a three-wheeler." And he's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. What the hell are you doing riding a three-wheeler? What's wrong with you?" So I got a little lecture about that. So I continued the story. And yeah, I said, "Man, I told him what I just told you." And then, I said, and first thing that hit the ground was my head. And then my body crumpled down on top of it. And the bike came down on top of that. And he looked at me, and I'll never forget this part. He looked at me and he saw my shoulders and he saw my neck, and he saw some development in my traps. And, I was kind of like, I was muscular. And he said, had you not been fit, I'm pretty sure you would have broken your neck. And that made a real big impression on me, because I realized that I didn't start training the week before that accident or the month before or even the year before. I had been training since I was 14 years old for specifically for things like this, to build my resilience against the physical world, and the psychological world in many cases. But man, that was a turning point in my realization that you have to commit to a life of fitness, no matter what it takes.
Well, and just like committing to things in general for the long term, because you never know when they're going to come in, into use or benefit you or something like that. I can't even tell. I mean, today we're talking about, things we should have done in our 20s or could have done in our 20s. It's like, it's not too late to start, but yeah, that's definitely a huge plug for fitness and strength. And you never know when it's going to show up and benefit you beyond the things that you're expecting from it,
That's one example, Paul. I could go on and tell you many other times that I've stepped off curbs and, twisted my ankle, but walked it off, and different
Yeah.
things that
Yeah.
my resilience has helped me with. And man, I'm just thankful that that seed got planted in me when I was young.
Yeah, absolutely. You bounce back a lot better. So, well, like we had talked about, like your leadership experience in the military. Sounds like you did a lot of great, exciting things. Um, would you say that leadership is important? And if it is, like, why is it important? Like, what's your take on the word leadership?
Man, I'll say, if you don't think leadership is important, just take a look at the world we live in these days. It's a freaking mess, man. I mean, it is a mess in every area. There's corruption. There's, just people unsure of where to go. There's a lack of hope. There's a lack of direction and vision. And I think leadership is the cure for most, if not all of that. So it is absolutely critical, I think, to the world today. And we need it. And in fact, I'm doing this movement at my company called a leadership revival. I'm trying to bring back solid, tried and true principles of leadership that have seemed to have been lost over the years, channeling all the way back to the great leaders of history, the MacArthurs and the Eisenhowers, and the Martin Luther Kings, and all the great leaders of the world. It's important, man. It is critical.
Yeah, well, and it's also, it sounds like it's one of those. It's very similar to working out, right? Delayed gratification, really challenging in the moment.
Yeah, the thing about leadership is it is a lot like working out. You might not want to do it. In fact, you hope it's going to be fun and enjoyable, but there's no guarantee it's going to be, but it's still necessary. So you hope it's going to be fun and enjoyable, and that's great if it is, but either way, it's necessary. There's
Yeah.
no way around it. Same as leadership, man. It's not fun. In fact, I did a TED talk on this a few years ago. A lot of times you're managing conditions to make other people successful, and you might live a whole lifetime as a leader and never once get recognized for some of the things you did behind the scenes to propel somebody else forward. But it's not about your recognition. It's about your calling. Leadership's a calling in my book.
Yeah, and then, but you have leadership experience from what we would epitomize as leaders, right? Like, what about like people, normal people like us, like me, all of us here? Like, how do we be a leader, especially in the times that we're in, considering the times that we're in? What do you mean by being a leader?
Well, I think one of the great question, man. I think you don't have to have our background to lead people. You have some influence no matter what you're doing, and I think it's just a matter of checking back in. We are so checked out, man. We got these things. Are these devices? We're always, even in lines at the grocery store, we're looking down at our phones and stuff like that. If you just look up once in a while, you might notice the single mom behind you that's struggling with her kids and she's got tears in her eyes. And you might just notice and say to her, and then you have to engage. Now, this takes courage. So first of all, awareness, then courage, so you can engage. You might just look at her and say, "Can I help you?" can I help you with something? Or give her a compliment of some kind, just anything to change the direction that she's heading in with her day. And to me, that's leadership. You don't want to talk to them because you're tired after your day. You just want to go home and kind of recluse into your Netflix or whatever, or you want to just stay in your Instagram while you're standing there. But to look up and engage with your world and have the courage to ask questions and talk to people, man, that's leadership. And anybody can do that. You
Yeah.
don't have to have our background, bro.
Maybe so. What you're saying is maybe just having the awareness that me standing up for the things that I believe in, living my example to the best of my abilities, and somehow like being aware of seeing people and what they're going through, and maybe just if you have that little urge, like I have this happen to me all the time. I'll see someone sitting there looking at some freaking salad dressing in the aisle, like I can tell they have no idea what they're looking for or what they're doing, or it seems like it, maybe they do. But a lot of times I'll have this like hint of maybe I should walk up and offer something. And I'm getting more and more to the point to where I insert myself because I feel like that is something that I can do at my level. Even if it's just someone was working out in the gym today and I saw her over there, bless her heart. She was doing the best that she could. It didn't look like to me like she knew what she was doing, but she was trying to do something. And I came up and I did a fist pump and I was like, "Hey, you're doing a great job. You're working your butt off over here." And you could tell it just made her day, So,
Yeah.
so maybe things like that, right? Like being aware, being awake, paying attention to what's happening, inserting yourself when it's uncomfortable, but as long as you feel like it's appropriate or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. Insert yourself. And a lot of my conversations start with dumb statements or questions. They have a sports team shirt on, like man, there's a story a couple years ago. I was going for a jog and there was a guy in the middle of the street holding a sign, one of those stop and slow signs. He was a construction worker. And I was running. I'm in Texas. I live in El Paso. And I look out and he's wearing a Giants hat, New York Giants. And I'm like, man, what the hell? It's a Giants hat in Texas. So after my run, I'm on my way back. He's still there. I walked down to the street and I asked the dumb question. I said, hey, are you a Giants fan? Most of my interactions start with something silly or dumb. And I said, are you a Giants fan? He said, yeah. And we started this conversation. And for a season of my life, I had a relationship with him. He had young kids, just like I did at the time. And he was working his way through the University of Texas in El Paso in electrical engineering. This was a smart guy trying to provide for his family. Had I not walked out and interacted with him, I don't know, man. He said some things to me over the course of a couple of years that impacted my life.
Dude,
Hopefully I
I
did
love
the
that.
same for him.
I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah, some of my greatest experiences and relationships are moments where I took the courage to actually say something to somebody, So again, if we're bringing it back to like things we could have done in our 20s, we can start doing right now. Maybe especially in this crazy world that we're in, just trying to engage with people,
Bro,
just trying to engage.
you can do that as soon as this call's over.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have this saying, you're always one meal away from being back on your diet. You're always 1 minute away from engaging with people. All you got to
Yep.
do is decide in your mind and then go make it happen.
Yep. I love it. I love it. So, uh, you had this talk that I remember watching. I think it was a short video on being a maverick, and that really resonated with me because I feel like most of my life I considered myself a rebel until I understood the difference between rebels and mavericks. So, can you speak just a little bit to that the concept of maverick? Was that what your TEDx talk was on?
No.
That was a separate talk.
A later talk I did called Disrupt HR. I spoke about being a maverick a little bit. I'm just, I mean, I know you, Paul. I'm just gonna be blunt on this podcast.
Uh-oh.
We got a bunch of pansies nowadays. No one is willing to stick their neck out and fall in their sword for anything they believe in because they're afraid of the consequences. The biggest fight for leaders after the pandemic is fear. Everybody's afraid. The pandemic did its damage and now everybody's afraid. We need people to step up and buck the system and question things. Here's the difference between rebels and mavericks. Rebels strike matches just to watch them burn. They cause strife in organizations just to watch the ensuing aggression or breakdown of the integrity of the team or whatever. They love that stuff. They get off on it. There's some weird people, evil people in the world. That's a rebel. A maverick questions things in order to make the organization better. They raise their hand and ask questions and why are we doing it that way? Is there a reason behind this decision? And they're not trying to cause strife or conflict or anything. They just want to know, because maybe there's a way to micro improve or to choose a different path. We need people to step up and be mavericks and question things in order to improve whatever organization they're part of, both formal and informal.
Well, it kind of comes back to what we were saying a while ago, and I've said this before too, which is, if you feel like something's off, or you have this thought about something that you feel like you could say something, but you're kind of nervous about saying it, especially if it goes against the mainstream of the norm. I think right now it's more important to have the courage to stand up for what you believe in more than ever because of everything that you just said, right?
Yeah, we need courage, man. I'll tell you right now too. And if you're afraid about losing your job, and getting fired or getting demoted or something like that, that stress that could come of you getting removed or losing your job is minuscule compared to looking back someday and wishing you would have said something when evil presented itself, or when something presented itself where you could have made a difference. That regret is going to be worse than you scrambling to find another job or to start a business. There's a million and one ways to make money nowadays. Don't worry about your position. Don't worry about all that stuff, man. We need you. We need you to step up and call things as you see them.
Yep. Yep. It's definitely super important these days. Um, so I think we talked the other day a lot about like personal interaction. We've been touching on that a little bit, how we're meant to know people. Anything else that we want to say along those lines? Because I feel like, remember, we talked about Jeremiah Johnson for some reason. What was that all about? Uh, Having personal interaction is super important. Getting to know people, right? You made a
Oh,
big emphasis on that, right? Getting to know people and the
yeah.
details of people.
Get to
And
know
again,
people.
yeah,
Get to know people. There's this belief that's prevalent today in the workforce that there's some kind of two different persons that shows up for work. There's two different people out there. There's the work person and the home person. And we just like to interact with the work person. Unfortunately, HR and privacy and all that other nonsense has really drilled down on our ability to ask people questions to get to know them, because people construe it as a freaking invasion of privacy and things like that. Leadership's not an invasion of privacy. It's a desire to know somebody. And in order to know, and once you know them, then you can impact their life. But if you don't know them, then you can't impact them. So let me let you in on something here, everyone. There is not a home person and a work person. They're the same person. And the challenges they have at home are going to come to work with them, and their work experience is going to go home with them. And in order to best lead somebody in a work environment, you have to know the whole person. Man, a couple years ago, I took some clients to a Chick-Fil-A here in El Paso locally. And I went up to the counter and said, "Hey, is the manager in?" I said, I talked to him. I said, "Hey, could you come out and share with us what's so special about Chick-fil-A? Just maybe a couple minutes." First of all, this dude spent 3 hours with us. He gave us some free lunch and sat there and talked to us for 3 hours, which impressed me. And then he shared something that I'll never forget. He said, "At Chick-fil-A, we are required to know everything about our team members." I said, "What do you mean?" Because that reminded me of the military, right? We always knew our soldiers. He said, "Well, I have to know if they have kids, what their names are, what their ages are, if they're involved in sports or extracurriculars. I got to know what those are, what their pets' names are, when their anniversary is." And he went down this list. And he said, "We're required to know this, but I'll tell you, the requirement lasted for about a day. And after that, I wanted to know these things about my team, because then I could impact their life in a meaningful way. Hey, John, I noticed that today's your anniversary, man. Happy anniversary.
yeah,
Why don't you take off early today? I'll cover your shift. Go take your wife to lunch and do something special." Or, hey, man, I noticed that your kid has a game today at 3. You're supposed to work till 4. Kick off early, man. Go ahead and enjoy the game. Good luck to them. Hope they win. If you don't know the person, you can't have those opportunities to lead them that way.
Yeah, so you're basically saying again, if we're tying this back to like things we could have done, should have done, can do now, it's getting to know people to the best of
Yeah.
your abilities, because it means a lot to people when you remember those minute details about them. And even just a little happy birthday, or hey, it's your anniversary, or you remember this special thing about them, it makes them feel important. And again, considering the situation, this world that we're in is more important than ever to have these bonds and to build community. And part of that starts with understanding people and knowing people.
Yes, absolutely, Paul. Let me illustrate that one more way because I think this will really resonate. Don't be a rooftop leader. And what I mean by that is, we watch all these Marvel movies and superhero movies nowadays. They're very popular. And at some point in any of those movies, there's some kind of fight scene in the city, and you see the hero and the villain jumping across rooftops fighting each other. You can name probably a million scenes that happens in, right? Well, you don't want to hit a lot of buildings, meaning you don't want to barely touch the surface of a bunch of people as a rooftop leader. You want to get to someone's building and you want to go all the way down. You want to know that they need new carpet on the 10th floor. The drapes on the 6th floor are kind of shabby and they need to be replaced. They need new plumbing in the basement. The heater's not working on floor 20. You want to know everything about somebody. Go all the way from the top to the basement and try to build as many of those as you can. And that is going to be a meaningful relationship.
Yeah. And so it sounds like to get there though, you got to spend time with people, right? In order to get to know them, you got to spend time with people. I've noticed this about myself recently. I almost crave interaction. When I went to Vegas, I got to have a little dinner and I got to visit with some people I hadn't seen in a while. We get so used to being in our, little situation, whatever it is. I'm sitting here working my butt off every day, sitting at my computer here, go on my walks, but you need to make an effort to get out and actually surround yourself with people, and those people that you see on a regular basis, maybe ask them questions, get to know them, because that helps you build relationships. It helps you build a community.
Absolutely. Well, when I got out of the Army, I had this dream of living on a mountain somewhere in a cabin, off the grid, solar, wind, a well, and talking to the squirrels, man. And I just wanted to isolate myself.
It
And
sounds like my dream.
yeah, man, that's right. And then eventually I thought, man, God didn't put me on this earth to isolate. He put me on
Yeah.
this earth to have influence. And just like you, Paul. And at some point we realized that'd be nice, but that's not really, like that famous saying, a ship in the harbor is safe, but that's not what ships are built for. That'd been a safe life for me up in the mountains, but I was made to interact even when I don't want to, even when I'm tired, even when I'm burned out. And I'm an introvert. People suck energy from me. I have to replace that with rest and working out and nutrition and different things. But I still get back into it, even though I know as soon as I step into the fray with people, it's going to start depleting me. My tank is typically bouncing on empty. But the thing about leadership is the amount of suck in real leadership does not diminish the value of the calling. So no matter how much it sucks, the calling is still prevalent and still important. And you got to really respect the calling.
Yeah. And then when you say leaders, again, that sounds like this, the epitome of a leader, like in leadership positions, but even just for us, like it's so important. And again, especially now than ever, to build these relationships and notice yourself isolating and notice yourself not interacting with people and trying to get out there and be around people and learn about people.
Yeah. You're not a leader because you have a title. There's formal and informal leadership, and just walking around on a daily, you're an informal leader. You don't have any title over that person that you interact with at the store or wherever, but informally, you can lead them into a better place in their life just by the things you say, by the compliments you give, by the example you set. So you're all of you on this call are leaders in some capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. So then what about the type of people that you surround yourself with? How important is that?
That's funny, man. I had this revelation this morning at the gym. Um, I thought loosely in my mind, the top 20 people in my life, like, the 20 friends that are top 20. And of those 20, 100% of those people work out. And of those 20, 80% of them are probably in the 1% of their peer groups. And so this journey of fitness I have for the last 40 years, I guess, 30 years, 31 years. Sorry, I'm not that
Been
old.
working out since you were a kid.
Yeah, 31 years has not been my own, man. I can take some credit for it, yes, but man, the community I've put myself around has really helped me. You got to build a varsity team in your life. And the problem, well, the challenge of varsity teams is you got to make cuts sometimes. And it is not fun to cut somebody out of your life who is pulling you down, but it's necessary. Back to necessary. They will pull you down.
Yep.
I had a friend, a mentor of mine, a colonel from West Point back in the 80s. He graduated. And he told me, he said, Kris, the world is full of takers. We are givers and the world is full of takers. And they will take everything you got if you let them. You got to guard your heart and guard what you give. So sometimes you got to make some cuts, and put those people where they belong. That doesn't mean you hate them or shun them or talk bad about them. That means you pray for them, you love them, you care about them from a distance. That's it.
Yeah. So surrounding yourself with people that build you up and inspire you. And
Yeah.
because I'm listening to you again, like you're in a leadership role and you have this business, but for all of us, it's really important that you surround yourself with people that are doing things that you want to do and that inspire you to do better and the things that you want to do better at. And I love the
Yeah.
workout example.
Great point, Paul. So you don't need to have our background. You don't have to be West Point grads, and you don't have to have a SWAT team experience and business experience and all. Anybody on this call, or anybody listening to this in the future, I know it's being recorded, you have the ability to impact other people. And it's as simple as being positive when somebody tells you what they're working on. Man, I'm working on this goal in my life. And you say, man, that's awesome. If there's a way I can support you, please tell me. Otherwise, I'm just going to be your cheerleader or whatever it is. Anybody can do that. You don't have to have a background. It just, anybody can be positive and speak life into you. They should be speaking life into you. What does the Bible say? Life and death is in the power of the tongue. It's one or the other, man. If they're giving you life, you keep them on the team. If they're not, they go to JV. And that's just how it is, man. That's
Yeah.
tough. Not easy.
Choose your friends, choose the people you hang out with very carefully, and ideally they're supporting the things that you believe are important and support you in your efforts. I love that. I get this vibe that you're like me. We talked about this the other day. Like I'm super self-critical, and I think that can be useful in some ways, right? So what are your thoughts on that inner voice that we have that tends to be super critical?
Man, bro, this is a big spot in my life right now. This is a big topic in my life right now. So I've been super critical my whole life. Nothing is ever good enough for myself. And I don't have a lot of I haven't had a lot of self-compassion. I met a very special lady a year ago, and she has really planted some seeds into me to be kinder to myself. And in fact, one day she just called me on it. She said, "Man, did you hear what you just said to yourself? You're not very nice." And man, I've told so many people over the years that I believe in them and that, they're enough and all this other stuff. And I wasn't telling myself that, man. And then one day I got this mug. I don't know if you can read that, but it says, Kris Yagel, I believe in you. She got me this mug. I pulled it out of the bag and I looked at it and immediately put it down and cried for 30 minutes.
Hmm.
That was a tipping point for me to realize I got to be kinder to myself. She believes in me and people believe in me, and I got to believe in me. And your self-talk can really impact you. Have goals, know where you're going, but be content where you are. And she has taught me that as well. And I learned that from her and a few other people lately in my life. But you might be here on your journey and you're trying to get here. Here is okay. Keep an eye on this, but live in the moment right here. That's fine. Be kind to yourself. It's beats being down here and you've come all this way. You're halfway up
Yeah.
the mountain. Be content where you are. It's so
Yeah, for
important.
sure. For sure. Celebrate your progress. It's like you got to have this balance, right? You got to have this balance of you're aiming for something, you're moving towards something. In some ways you want to be content with where you are, and in other ways it's like it's okay not to be because you're striving for something different and better, but it comes back to that old adage, which is try to enjoy the journey and the process, because it's going to be a never ending lifetime pursuit of these things that you think that you want. But if you can find a way to be in the present and enjoy what it is that you're doing, then I think that's going to give you a lot more happiness than, making it or not making it, or achieving something or not achieving something. I know you work out a lot. What about self-care? How important is self-care in, what we're doing here on this earth?
It's really important. When you're young, I think one of our goals and every young person is, how hard can I fight? How much can I lift? How many hours can I work? How exceedingly past my requirements can I go on this job? Like, what can I do? How can I just hit the ball out of the park every time? You're looking for a home run every time. You need a base hit to bring that last runner in and win the game, but you're looking for the home run every time. And that's a fleeting pursuit because we can't maintain that level of intensity for too long. I like to say this in small engine repair, which I'm into. Engines can run at redline, they can run at high RPM, and they'll run really strong, high torque, high horsepower, right until they blow up. And then that engine is done, unless you go for the rebuild and all that other stuff, but it's done. You can run yourself at high RPMs, but you're going to blow up, man. You got to, these days, I realize it's not about how hard I can fight. It's about staying in the fight. How can I maximize my time on earth so I can enjoy the most possible influence I was meant to have? And
Yeah.
what that means is I do sprints. Sometimes I go high RPMs and then I throttle back and then I rest for a few days. When I was younger, bro, when we were in the weight room and stuff, back then at West Point and into my 20s, when I would get a cold, I would just live through it. And I would overtax my central nervous system to the point where that cold would last forever. Now what happens? I get as much as a sniffle. I take the day off. I dose up on vitamin C and zinc and a bunch of other supplements, alkaline water and everything else that I know works for me. And I take a few days off. And you know what? I haven't been sick for 8 years, minus COVID, which I didn't take any meds for and beat on my own anyways. But it's been 8 years because now when it comes on, I'm like, okay, I got to stay in the fight. I just back off, take 3 days off, and then come back and it's gone. It's cold's gone. Took me forever to learn that.
Yeah,
Forever.
yeah. I remember, man, pulling the all-nighters, and I think if again, circling back to things we could have done, should have done in our 20s, things we can definitely focus on now.
You can
And I
do it
feel like
now.
a lot of us here, are in this mindset, but it's just being aware of this desire to constantly push yourself without understanding that I need that ebb and flow. I need the self-care. I need the rest. I need the breaks. And sleep comes up a lot with me in my health coaching with my clients. Like sleep is it's like the final frontier. It's really hard for people to wrap their minds around. Yeah, but I got all these other things to do. But the reality is, if you take time for yourself and you take time to focus on your personal health and your own self-care, and you don't push so hard, you have to find the right balance. You're going to show up better for the things that you care about in your life. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
the bottom line.
Yeah. Moses was 80 when he led the people to the promised land. He was 80. Had he worn himself into the ground as a younger man, who knows who would have led the people, but it wouldn't have been him. He was 80, man. So this is a long fight. It's a journey, and you just got to stay on the path. And sometimes you have to throttle back every once in a while so you can stay on it. It's okay. This week alone, I missed 2 workouts for semi-legitimate reasons. You know, I have a foot, I had some pain in my foot and some other things, and kids are sick, and you know, I took some time. But you know, I went in there this morning and I was stronger than I have been for weeks. And I throttled back. I took some time. It's okay, man. It's not, you know, what's that psychological thing in bodybuilding, the fear of smallness. You feel like you miss 1 ounce of protein in one day, that all of a sudden your biceps shrunk by 2 inches. That's bullshit, man. That's all bullshit. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, or you're sick for a few days or a week, and it's just like you feel like you lost everything, or you can't make it to the gym for a few days or a week, and you feel like you've lost everything. But yeah, to circle it back, you know, the lesson there is, you know, just take breaks for yourself. Self-care, super critical and important, because the better you can show up to life, the better you're going to be for all the things that you care about.
Absolutely.
Love it, love it, love it. So let's circle back to some of the things you talked about, and let's just have like some key takeaways. Again, like, you know, the title of this talk was things we could have done, should have done in our 20s. We can definitely start doing now. What's summary takeaway? How do we be more resilient?
First of all, decide. Make the choice here. I'm going to be more resilient. Everything starts with choice. Everything starts in our mind. Do not get discouraged that you're at a certain age and you feel like you should be further ahead. Nobody cares at what age you become a millionaire. Nobody's going to ask a millionaire, hey, how old were you when you finally made your first? Nobody cares, man. You're a freaking millionaire. Like, nobody cares how you started your resilient journey. It's important that you just start. So make the decision. Tomorrow will be better than today. The next day be better than the day before, and continue that process. We have this pastor at my church. The dude is close to 70, if not 70. And he is built like a brick outhouse, man. And he looks like Clint Eastwood, like he's tough. And got arms bigger than both of ours, Paul, and ripped. And somebody asked him one time what the secret was, and it was consistency. And he said, I've been working out 5 times a week, usually 3 weights, 2 or 3 cardio, so 5-6 times a week. And I've been doing that for over 45 years. That was it. Just consistency.
Consistency. And like you said before, you know, you start now with the most important things. You know, you figure out what those things are. I can make a huge plug for health habits, you know, but start now, because even though there's delayed gratification, those things are going to serve you, and you don't know when they're going to serve you. Of course, you get the immediate benefits, some of the fringe benefits, but to build resilience, you need to start doing the things today that you know are going to serve you later in life.
Yeah, it's a habit. Like most of us, I hope, brush our teeth every day. Well, commitment to resilience is also a daily habit. You know, like you talking about sleep, getting the proper amounts of sleep and creating that environment, fitness, working out, fitness eating, those things. It's a journey, and you can decide to start now. And if you do, a year from now, in some ways, you might be unrecognizable. You're on that journey and you're moving forward.
That's right. Cumulative, and it adds up. Now, what about how do we be leaders, even if we're not in leadership positions? What's your summary takeaways on that?
Yeah, unplug with the damn devices and just be aware of your outside world, and engage with it. Have the courage to engage it. So be aware and then have the courage to engage with it. Everybody here listening has value and purpose. And it is not to scroll Instagram. It is to interact in some way with people on this earth, because we're meant to be in a community. And you are going to change someone's life if you just take that seriously, become aware, and engage with people. You have something to offer. Everyone here has something to offer.
Especially if you're in public situations, right? So like you said, you know, grocery store, gym, you know, just have the courage to just be aware, look around. If there's a place, you know, someone that you feel like you could have a conversation with, or insert yourself, or someone that's struggling or suffering or doing a good job. Oh man, I saw this lady doing laps around the gym. I don't know how old she was, just an old lady doing laps around the gym. I was just so proud of her. She was there by herself. And I told her, I was like, hey, you're doing a great job. And it made her feel great to hear that. But basically, especially in public situations, be awake, be aware, don't hesitate to interact with people to some degree.
Absolutely. And you don't do it for selfish reasons, but I will tell you the times when I haven't wanted to engage with people and I did, they have
Oh
also
yeah.
they have also impacted me, man. There's
Yeah. Yeah.
the
It feels
president of
great. It
our
feels great, right?
Oh, dude, it's the president of our local chamber of commerce. Is a friend of mine. She's doing amazing things. I met her on a plane 5 years ago,
Hmm.
traveling somewhere. Just struck up a conversation, either her or I don't remember, and we hit it off. And now I'm trying to support her and her efforts and what she's doing. And I was just on a plane. All I wanted to do was put my head back and disengage. But man, she added so much to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So take every opportunity that you can, especially in public situations, to make yourself available, be aware, talk to people, have the courage to do it. Super important these days. What about, we talked about building a community, surrounding yourself with people. How can we summarize that? What are some key takeaways there?
Yeah, build a varsity team. Take stock of the people closest to you. If
Mhm.
they're adding, great. If they're neutral, evaluate why. Maybe it's a season they're going through, and engage and find out why. Maybe they need to lean on you for a little bit, which is fine too because you're their friend, and you should do that. But if they develop this pattern of constantly taking and pulling from you and holding you down, it's time to maybe move them to JV. Pray for them, love them, don't cut them out of your life entirely unless it's really, like abusive or something like that. But you don't have to engage, man. Like you don't have to. You can just kind of put them on this waiting to see pattern. You have to build a varsity team.
Yep. And surround yourself with people that inspire you and lift you up and have the habits that you want and to help you move forward in the things that you care about and you feel like are important in your life, right?
Bro, yes. Those 20 people I mentioned, my top 20 friends, and you're in that group, man. I struggle just to stay in the top 10 of that group. I mean,
Mm.
they're people that are ahead of me. That's okay. You got to check the ego, put that aside, and realize that ultimately they're going to make you better. And you don't want to be the biggest fish in your pond.
Yeah, too much attention, man. I don't like too much attention. What about, and then also we talked about getting to know people, right? So you got your little inner circle, you've got the people that you feel like build you up and you're trying to make these connections. It's important to get to know them, right? Get to know
Yeah, you got
details
to.
about them and their life, not just their work role, but also their personal role. Get to know these people that you interact with and you feel like are a part of your community or tight knit group.
Go deep. Go deep, man. Jesus walked on this earth, and the whole time he had 12 disciples. 12. He didn't have hundreds of followers. I mean, people knew who he was and they came to see him, but he didn't have like all these followers and superficial relationships. He discipled 12 people. And if you think about it, I don't remember the math on this, but if you go deep in one relationship 1 year, and then the next year that person does the same thing that you did to them, goes deep on another relationship, and that second year you also pick someone else. If you do the math on that, at like 10 years you've reached like half the population of the earth. Like it's
Oh,
it's it's crazy. One deep relationship, they're just so much more valuable, man, than these superficial, fake social media relationships that we have. I mean, there's some value in it, but you got to go deep, man. Then
yeah.
don't be worried about the numbers. Go
Yeah,
deep.
and get to know people. Take time. I'm trying to get better at like memorizing kids' names. Memorizing my family, extended family, cousins, and I feel like the older I get, the more I'm losing the capacity to remember. Or maybe I've always been like that. I don't know.
Well,
But
here's a pro tip. I know you like pro tips, man. Here's a pro tip. You're not going to retain all this crap up here, but this will.
yeah.
You can put, man, in my contacts, if you look through my notes on my phone, I have dog's name is Winston, kids' names, da 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 da,
Oh,
ages,
I
da da
love
da
it.
da. I have like notes. And then sometimes when I know I'm going to see that person, I pull up their contact card because my memory is going to fail me, but this will not in most cases. And I pull it up. I'm like, oh, yeah. And I walk in, hey, man, how's Winston? And they're like, oh, I can't believe you remember that. And I'm like, oh yeah, how could I
Dude,
forget Winston?
that's a
But
good practical use of these little devices. I love it. As you get to
use
know
them for
people,
your
take little
advantage.
notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So and then I just want to make a plug too for, considering again, thinking about things we could have done in our 20s, should have done in our 20s. I didn't find the gift of health until I was in my mid late 30s, and I feel better than I've ever felt in my entire life. I'm doing something I'm super passionate about. I have love in my life. And I can only imagine, what things would be like if I would have found this earlier. But it is more important now than ever to make your health a priority because there's a lot of things that we can be focusing on. There's a lot of uncertainty, food prices, food scarcity, gas prices, gas scarcity, inflation. Who the heck knows what's going to happen with the world in the future? But what we can do, in addition to trying to figure out, what to do with our finances and preparedness and other things, is we can focus on our personal health and resilience because this is going to serve us no matter what happens in the future. I just want to make a big plug for that.
You nailed it, man. I couldn't say it better. You're absolutely right. You and I are walking parallel paths. I found the love of my life recently too. And you know what? I was at a point where I was ready to be my best self for her. And that journey started a long time ago. A lot of learning points along the way, but I feel like she's getting my best, even though I'm 45 and whatever. I just it's important. It's important to start now because you never know what's ahead of you.
Absolutely. Anything we want to close this thing out on? I remember I think you had a really good story around the Blackhawk Down thing we talked about.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite stories, man. So Black Hawk Down is about the
A lot
movie.
of people may not be familiar with that.
It's a movie called Black Hawk Down, and it details the accounts. It's a detailed account, pretty accurate from what I've learned from historians about the Battle of Mogadishu in '93 when we went in to basically capture a warlord. And we sent in the special forces, the Rangers, and the Delta Force. Delta Force, if you don't know, is like the cream of the crop, man. You got NFL players and then you got Pro Bowl players. You got special forces and then you got Delta Force. These guys are top tier. And so Black Hawk Down, the title says really what happened. A couple Black Hawks went down in these streets of Mogadishu. We got caught in the streets because our vehicles were wide and the streets were narrow, and we got caught up. So they sent in air support. Super 6-1 went down first, and then Super 6-4 went down, two helicopters, Black Hawks. The second one was piloted by Mike Durant, and he was a warrant officer pilot, and he lived. He crashed, but he lived. And up in the air, there's a surveillance helicopter, and there's two Delta Force snipers, marksmen, up in that helicopter. And what they could see is the crash site. He's alive, and then there's a crowd forming, and people coming, insurgents coming towards the helicopter. So they wanted to go down, and they asked 3 times from higher command to be set on the ground so they could set up a perimeter. They had very limited ammunition and weapons, but they kept asking, and finally on the third ask, they got put down on the ground. They set up a perimeter until they were eventually overcome by the crowd, and their bodies were dragged through the streets. And they were posthumously given the Medal of Honor. Mike Durant lived. They saved his life. Later in negotiations, we got him back. He still walks around today. He's written a book. He influences people, because of their sacrifice. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Well, I'm not a Delta Force sniper. I was never in the military. I'm never going to be in a situation like that. You're right. But you know what you can do? You can be aware of what's going on around you, and you can speak a word of life into someone that you come in contact with. You can encourage people in your circle. You can lift them up. You can be a light. You can be the salt of the earth to them. They don't have to be people that they can be complete strangers. You have in you the power to influence someone, to save someone. Just a kind word can keep people off of a water tower that afternoon. Everybody's hurting almost that you come in contact with. One kind word from you, hey, that's a beautiful purse, man. Where'd you get that? Hey, you know what? You got your hands full, but it looks like you're doing a really good job. Hey, whatever, something positive. You have that power. the greatest use of life is to spend it on something that will outlast it. William James said that. So remember that on your daily. The greatest use of your life is to spend it on something that will outlast it. Your legacy will live in the people that you interact with.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway from this discussion is just having the courage to interact with people. Even
Absolutely.
you have that little. I just it's almost like a little voice in the back of my head. Hey, you should, you could, and then I honor that, and I try to actually insert myself. So, heck yeah. So Eric says, awesome info presentation. Well done, both of you. And then Fred, the greatest warriors have a higher power. That's right. Thank you, Suzanne. Suzanne says, great info. My favorite saying to my kids, show me your friends. I'll show you your future. I love it. Thank you all so much for showing up. Get out there, freaking make health your number one priority and start talking to people. Stand up for what you believe in. Be a maverick, not a rebel.
Paul, thanks for this opportunity, bro. And it's an honor to be a warrior alongside you in this journey of life. So thank you. I appreciate your friendship over the years and your connection and what you're doing to make the world a better place. I respect you. I respect you and I look up to you in many ways.
Yep. Same here, man. We're all doing great things in our own way.